Niranjan sir, your slide is visible.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask you, whether my slide is visible or not. Because there is bit of a delay on my screen. I'm not able to look at it, so I was about to ask you the same question. Well, friends, it's always pleasure to share views on topics of professional interest. And when Lokeshji asked me to, take up code of ethics, I said I'll certainly share some of my views on code of ethics to way forward. So practically, I'm happy that even if this is a VCM, I could see a lot of faces available on the screen. So that's a big plus. Otherwise, I have been habitual of talking in front of my machine only for almost last 2 3 years now, and that's where we are facing a lot of difficulty. Is that it becomes so monotonous to talk in front of a computer without getting a feedback. So certainly, I'll be very happy if you all can share your views. The topic is pretty standard for all of us because code of ethics is part of our daily life, and it begins with code of ethics and ends with code of ethics, whatever activity we conduct as a practitioner or as a employee, a chartered accountant. So primarily, I do not have great things to share which is not known to all of us. But only thing I would try to bring it at one place, and I would have little more courage than you all to share views openly and then take up your views for a discussion. So please make sure that your contribution is also equally important, because looking at a rule is always a perception of individual. Like say I look at it from this side, you will look at it from some other side, and ultimately both of us would contribute in developing a model which would be ultimately allowing all of us to comply with that particular code. Something of this kind also has happened with this code of ethics. Like we all are aware, 2009 was the last revision which we had, and now this 2019 revision which has taken place. Especially in 2019, there was a disruption because of COVID, so obviously a major portion was deferred to 2020, 2021, and some portion was deferred like NOCLA, then tax audit compliances, and percentage of fees for larger clients was deferred up to 30th September 22. So obviously, for all of us also, it's a learning curve, and as and when we progress, we would start to comply with one by one all the requirements. But one plain reading of 2019 code gives me a clear insight that it's nothing new. It's part of our earlier structure, and it's only modified to the extent, or a little bit of drilling down, or maybe additional requirements with respect to independence, etc., have been brought in. So broadly, what I'll be dividing my discussion would be, initial part would be about the ethics, and the latter part of my discussion would be some questions which normally I face when I talk on this code of ethics. So I made a few 8 or 10 maybe FAQs which we'll deliberate, so that all of you also can participate. So I'll be posing a FAQ. We'll put it for open house answers maybe, and then I'll try to tell you what is the exact provision as of now. So that's how it will be done. And I hope all of you are with me on this, because this is such a tough topic to deal with. And I was fortunate to hear about a gentleman on screen who is an expert of a field. Overall, our objective is to reach towards that goal. Like recently, I was going through a database of chartered accountants which was published, wherein I could find that almost 72% of chartered accountants in practice are individual practitioners. And I always look at this code of ethics compliance from that particular segment of our practicing members, and I realize in most of the cases, especially after this revised edition of code of ethics with independence being to be tested based on various threats, I certainly believe it's going to be a tougher challenge for those who are individually practicing to comply with this independence standards. So primarily, what we will be starting with is our motto. Normally in our physical programs, we rise for this motto every time. But our code of ethics comes from this motto itself. Even dream objects like objects of walking due to the supreme person. Even dream consciousness is the proof. So this consciousness of this our ICI motto, it's something which is the beginning or the starting point when I look at my code of ethics requirements. Practically, ethics means moral values. Accounting to one's conscience is what a simple definition we can look for. So practically, it's there in our motto, it's there in our values which are being taught. And as an article student, till the time which we pass out and after passing out, what we observe our senior members that accountability is something which becomes part and parcel of our entire practice area or entire employment area. And that becomes my first and foremost, what you can say, principle which deal with ethics in our professional life. Also, another simple definition which applies to what is ethics is eternal vigilance at the cost of independence. And as rightly pointed out in 2019, there is a separate chapter now on independence. Earlier, there was also a chapter, but which was quite simple, and we were, required to keep a arm's length distance. We were supposed to be independent, not doing some other work, etc. Was part of it. But now it's an independence code, and there are various threats which are being, envisaged in the code. And our requirement is that we have to now document a lot about these threats to independence in our working papers to establish that there is a policy of independence, number one. Number two, all our independent assignments are being tested for the scale of independence, and you have to make a proper documentary evidence available for verification whether we are compliant with independence standards. Now, the question comes in, what's the kind of compliance we require? Like we talk about standards on auditing, we talk about accounting standards, wherein, we try to see that, what is the kind of, what is the percentage of completion we do or achieve during this audit. Here in ethics, friends, my personal opinion is that, it can be on either side. Either one can be ethical or it can be not ethical. There is nothing in between, that I'm following certain things and I'm not following certain things. So this particular rule, which has come in 2019, is very clear. We have to make sure that we are on the other side, that is ethical side, and not to remain on not ethical side. The biggest question which comes to mind is, what is the need for ethics? Like we always see, that there are so many requirements. Rather than requirements, I always, when I interact, I come across cases where, members say that instead of what can be done, it is what cannot be done is usually mentioned in the, code of ethics. So it's kind of rules which we say that this is not to be done, this is not to be done. So what is to be done? So why there is need of having so many rules for us? Obviously, it's an enactment of parliament, and we are such a unique profession that we boost ourselves that we follow highest level of ethics. So naturally, because of the credibility of our profession, this is something which is a must. And also, you will see that the expectation from our profession is substantially been increased in last 10, 12 years, 15 years. And you would find that, there has been tremendous focus on the credibility of our reports, credibility of our work done. So especially based on these 2 points, I think one gets an answer easily that why our profession requires this code of ethics, which needs to be followed by all the members. So let's start with some basics, because I could see a lot of senior members in the audience, as well as there could be freshers, youngsters. So just a revision, So basically, these are the 5 principles fundamentally we look for when it is code of ethics. It starts with integrity, objectivity, professional competence and due care, confidentiality, and professional behavior. Now, the last one, professional behavior, is like there is a separate schedule also attached in earlier 2009 schedule, 9 code of ethics, where our professional behavior has to be to uplift our ICAI's position in the entire society. So anything which damages the ICAI's image would be caused as a non-professional behavior or something like that. Say confidentiality, it's part and parcel of our work from day one, which we join in our article student days. We have been told that the information cannot be shared. Even when we go home, we were not allowed to talk to our parents, family about what activities which we carried out. And I think that is something which is there in our blood for a long time. that we maintain utmost confidentiality when it comes to our clients' work. Integrity, objectivity, and professional competence can be also further, defined, like, honest approach, honest to the core, professional competence for accepting any assignment, be objective about our, work. So all that is being properly defined in this code of ethics. So let's go through one by one quickly, maybe in next 5 to 7 minutes, just to, refresh ourselves about what are the basic requirements of these fundamental principles. Integrity is defined as, straightforward and honest approach, fair dealing and truthfulness, not to associate with communication or information containing false or misleading information, and step to disassociate with the above information once known. So basically, this is something which we all follow when we look for any audit assignment or any professional assignment, where, our approach is always straightforward and honest. We have to make sure that our dealings are fair and we are truthful to the work which is being assigned to us. And wherever we come across any information which is misleading, we must immediately, take necessary steps to, clear those or disassociate with those. Coming to objectivity, not to compromise professional or business judgment because of bias, conflict, interest, or undue influence to others. Not to undertake a professional activity if it's unduly influencing the accountant's professional judgment. A classic case came to me for a discussion was, in one of the cases, like if you remember, Lokesh was referring to some bank audit assignments. So we keep on interacting about it. In one of the bank audits, yes. Anybody wants to ask a question?
Niranjan, I think you should continue.
I think it was by mistake somebody would have clicked it.
Yeah.
There was one assignment, of a bank branch audit, and in that, one of the auditors was, was asking for some information from a central auditor, and during the interaction, we come across a case where, there was information which was available with that particular client, and based on that, a particular loan account was being judged whether it's a performing asset or a non-performing asset. So when the case came to me, I interacted with that auditor and I told that auditor that, because you know about this particular client is a good thing, but when it comes to doing an audit, it has to be a very objective assessment of, whether the asset is performing based on the IRAC norms. And, our fundamental principle of, code of ethics also requires us that we should not carry our other information which may not be useful for the audit on the table, And after one day, I got a call from that particular auditor saying that, yes, you were right. I had an information, so I was observing that information to be absolutely correct. And my objective of this audit was deferred because, I was believing that what information or a piece of document which I had in my hand was the right one rather than testing it during the audit. So it was good that we interacted. The auditor formed a view based on the audit of documents which were made available to them in the branch rather than the earlier bias or information which was carried out. So this is something which we normally follow. So these two are the things which are, commonly being compliant. We observed, our most of the auditors are found complying with these two particular principles. The third principle is professional competence and due care. Attain and maintain professional knowledge and skill, act diligently, and in accordance with applicable technical and professional standards, ensure appropriate training and supervision of subordinates. And friend, I think this is where we have to spend a little bit of time. Like I was going through the website of ICAI and trying to find out, what kind of compliance requirements currently we have for various types of audits. And I observed that, there are around 30 plus, guidance notes which are made available. There are almost 40 plus standards on auditing for statutory audits. There are standards on internal audit which are in recommendatory nature. So there are various guidance notes, various documents, various advisories which are made available to us as members by the ICAI. And, coming back to this principle of fundamental requirement is that, once we accept a particular assignment, we must ensure that we are professionally competent enough to accept that particular assignment. And this is where, I need some inputs from you all. And if I may throw open a discussion on this. Like, as I said, recently I was going through a database where, almost 70+% of our members are individual. And the kind of areas where we can practice, like professional opportunities, there is a publication of ICI. We have listed around, more than 300 types of services which a chartered accountant can provide, as a practitioner. Now, coming to this, I always, have a doubt in my mind whether I, as a chartered accountant, is professionally competent enough and I take due care or perform the work according to the professional knowledge and skill, or comply with rather all applicable technical and professional standards for all the various types of assignments which I am carrying out as an individual. So maybe a quick thought from any one or two of our members on this, like, because I always feel difficult that when I try to enter into an area, like say for example, if you are doing a tax audit, then you must make sure that the tax audit guidance note, which is comprehensively, revised in 2022, is being complied with. Similarly, if you are doing an audit of company, like, recently I was doing a bank audit, and, I found that some of the balance sheets of the borrowers which have come, usually till October, nobody submits them. But when after October, when they submit, I come across some of the balance sheets, which are not in compliance with the revised CARO requirements, or they are not in compliance with the revised Schedule 3 requirements of, presentation of balance sheet or profit and loss account, and presentation or disclosure requirements. So, this is something in the area where, we need to deliberate a lot about our team members, and we have to ensure that all types of assignments which we are doing, first we need to look at, what are the professional standards applicable, what are the technical standards applicable, and whether all the work which I am carrying out during the year for these various types of assignments, whether they are complying with and there is a sufficient documentary evidence available for it. So at present, out of these basic standards, I believe that, most of us who are proprietors or individuals, they need to make sure that there is sufficient documentation made available in your working papers for the compliance of revised code of ethics, that we are professionally competent enough and we are updated enough to, do various types of assignments which we are currently doing. As I said in the beginning, confidentiality is something which is part of us from our training days. So we have to maintain confidentiality of information acquired as a result of professional and employment relationships, disclose information when required by law or authorized by the client, consider relevant factors while deciding disclosure of confidential information, maintain confidentiality even after the end of relationship with the client. So these are 4 or 5 things which are clearly spelled out in the basic fundamental principle. That number one, even if you do not have the same client with you continuing, still this confidentiality clause would be applicable. Number two, in case of, disclosure required by law, or in case if it is authorized by the client, then only we can, disclose such information. Now, this also applies to all our team members which are part of our team which works in our offices. Many a times, I've observed that, chartered accountant firms, they do maintain, sufficient confidentiality amongst the team members as well. Like, if somebody is doing a work of filing of income tax return, then the information about the particular client is only handed over to the team only for the sake of preparing the computation, etc., rather than, for the full period for which that paper remains in our office. And always at the end of the day, the papers are being stored with a third party, maybe probably the one who is not actually dealing with that particular client, but somebody who is very senior in our office, and they have more responsibility when it comes to our office work. So that kind of confidentiality is mentioned. Like sometimes, user ID passwords are being shared. It's always good to have a documentary evidence or a client sitting in your office when you operate on behalf of that client. All those precautions needs to be taken when compliance with this confidentiality clause is required to be done. Last but not the least is the professional behavior. We must avoid activities that impair the reputation of the profession. Do not make exaggerated claims for services offered. Disparaging references or unsubstantiated comparisons with others. Not to advertise any profession or other facts that are in violation of advertisement guidelines issued by ICAI. So, in short, compliance with all the requirements which would not, disrepute the ICAI or our profession as a whole. So, friends, these are the 5 basic fundamental principles, and I think our entire office team is responsible for following all this in toto. As I said in the beginning, there is no partial compliance expected. So, what compliance is expected is 100% compliance with respect to these basic fundamental principles of our code of ethics. So, what are the common lapses observed? Common lapses observed is like a lot of us act in good faith. Like, मिल जाएगा, दे देंगे, अभी भेज रहे हैं, हो जाएगा, आप कर दीजिए. All those things, I think most of us listen from our clients, Like recently, I've come across a case where, there was no appointment letter available with the client and the work was done. And then when they charged X amount of fees, the client disagreed with that amount of fees, saying that this was not agreed upon. Kindly tell us where it is mentioned. So many a times we do a lot of things in good faith, but I always tell my friends that nothing can be done in good faith, whether it's a one-time client like a bank branch statutory audit, which we do for 10, 12 days in a year, or it's with a client which is with you for last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years. Everything should be black and white, documented. Another major lapses which is observed is weak documentation. Like during my articleship days or my younger days as chartered accountant, what I used to gather from friends who were senior to me was like, if no documents, then there is no audit done. That was the thumb rule, So expectation is that work should not only be done, but it should be seen that it is done. So documents would speak for the work done, not those individuals who were part of the team. And there's a golden rule, faintest of ink is stronger than the strongest of memory, Like I remember some of my seniors and some of my younger friends also, they boast themselves that they have fantastic memory and they recollect a lot of numbers of a lot of clients very easily, It's fantastic. I must salute the kind of abilities they possess. But when it comes to documentation, that memory is of no use, Ultimately, what speaks is the papers which are available in your working paper file. Lack of proactiveness, Like compliance is, always done post facto, Whereas, in such kind of code of ethics, I think it's always good to be proactive, and we should envisage what's happening in next year, and then accordingly we must plan from day one for the entire audit, entire assignment. Lack of communication skills. Many a times, I find difficulty in saying no to a particular work, and then ultimately I end up in taking up that assignment. So can't say no could be one of the major, lapses which have been observed. Obsession with tax considerations, Like even today, most of the tax practitioners who do audit, they have the first and foremost interest in understanding what are the tax considerations, Like some of the practitioners who are in tax, if a case comes in or a scrutiny assessment goes against the client, then the chartered accountant feels the pinch more than the client, So that's kind of a involvement one has in the tax considerations. So these are all based on various case studies which are published by ICAI till now about disciplinary decisions, and primarily these are 4 or 5 causes whereby a member has been punished due to lack of either of this. So make sure that your entire documentation, entire processing is taking care of all these non-compliances in various cases which are observed, so that in our case we will be compliant with most of the requirements of code of ethics. So how to remain updated? You have to read and read a lot. Nowadays, most of us are facing difficulty that our reading is restricted to need to know basis. Now, what I mean by need to know basis is, whenever I need something, I refer to the book probably which is on the shelf, or maybe I refer to, a soft copy of the book, or the shortest possible way is I type in key search words into the search engine, and whatever comes up first, that's my reading. But practically, one has to make sure that there has to be a continuous updation of, what are the do's and don'ts for us. So there are various items listed on your screen: updated Chartered Accountant Act, updated regulations, ICAI publication on Code of Ethics, FAQs published in 2012 are still valid, manual for members, ICAI website for various pronouncements, Ethical Standard Board's website for all updates on this, and then also the Ethics Plus booklet, which used to be published regularly. Also in CA journals, in most of the times you would find that, there is one section of Code of Ethics where some of the FAQs are discussed. So, you have to continuously update yourself with respect to the compliance requirements on ethics side. Important points to remember, like based on the cases which were discussed, decided, like misconduct proceedings initiated on receiving a complaint or information from any source, there can be suo motu action by the council. So practically, there is no need to have a complainant. ICAI can take on its own. The ICAI council can, take on its own a call, and they may probably, file a complaint and initiate an action. Similarly, complainant did not come with a clean hands. Council not concerned with the locus standi of the complainant. They are concerned about the contents of the complaint, and they will proceed accordingly. Withdrawal of complaint permitted only with permission of Board of Discipline or Disciplinary Committee. Council has jurisdiction basically over an individual. Complaint filed beyond period of 7 years may not be entertained at the discretion of the Director of Discipline if he or she is satisfied that it would be difficult to obtain evidence. Even if respondent compensates the complainant for any losses, it will not undo the misconduct. Even if nobody is aggrieved due to a particular lapse or misconduct of the member, there can be a disciplinary proceedings against the member. Recently, there was one writ petition filed by an aggrieved member where ICAI has taken, cognizance of a case which was published in newspapers and suo motu filed a complaint. However, the Honorable High Court in that particular case has decided that, ICAI has always a right to act against the member if they feel so, and they have written it back to the ICAI saying that they can proceed with the matter. And there is no time limit. It can continue for years together. So this is what is gathered from various cases discussed in ICAI publication about, punishments handed over to the members or the disciplinary proceeding cases discussed. So we have to make sure that, our conduct is such that we do not come in any of this. Also, the code specifies what could be the probable, penalty. Like for first schedule, that is by Board of Discipline, there is reprimand, suspension up to 3 months, or fine up to ₹1 lakh. Reprimand is a cautionary letter. Other than that would be the punishments. For second schedule, reprimand, suspension for any period or permanently, and fine up to 5 lakh rupees. There is no need to refer the case to the High Court because ICAI can take up the matter up to the highest level. Mostly you will know that the entire disciplinary committee sits for the bench, and more number of independent members, government nominees sit on this. ICAI being a member of International Federation of Accountants, IFAC, the ethics of International Ethical Standard Boards of Accountants, IASBA, have been considered. So the existing 2009 was also based on 2005 edition of IASBA course, and now this 2019 ICAI Code of Ethics is based on 2018 edition of IESBA Code of Ethics. This is how the book looks like, and I think most of us would be having a copy of this book. Nowadays, it's available for a free download from ICAI website. and I'm sure by now most of us would be having this copy. It's a very interesting book, elaborates all the new requirements of the Code of Ethics. What are the changes? Like 5 most important structural changes is independence requirements for audit and review engagement, and other assurance engagements are now clearly defined, separately defined. Earlier, there was one chapter on independence. Now the chapter says about whether it's part of audit and review engagement and other assurance engagement, and accordingly there is a different requirement with respect to independence. Independent sections also recharacterized as international independent standards. So there is a change. The should word is now shall. New pattern of structuring of sections from 100 to 900 now, same like what we have seen in standards on auditing, and increased clarity about responsibility with respect to the firms, network firms, and individuals within the firms. Earlier, you all are aware that it was primarily the individuals with whom the Code of Ethics used to deal with. So what the changes were made, where domestic provision was stricter than corresponding ISBA provision, the stricter provision has been continued. Like we have a total bar on accounting by the statutory auditor. Like we always say that accounting ends and auditing starts. So obviously what we try to say is that, an auditor cannot do accounting. So that is being, a stricter provision which we had, which has been continued. Where domestic legal requirement governs the issue, like network would only refer to network registered with ICAI. Because in ICAI, there is a requirement that we should have a membership of a network which is registered with ICAI, and then there are rules for networking guidelines in 2021 specifies all those requirements. Where a domestic requirement has no corresponding provision of ISBA code like firm rotation and all, that has been also brought in. And language changes like professional accountant in business, professional accountant in service. Earlier it was a chartered accountant. Now a practicing chartered accountant is termed as a professional accountant in business, and professional accountant in service is a chartered accountant who is an employee in a industry or employee with a chartered accountant firm. This is how the structure or sections of these revised Code of Ethics. The part 1 talks about section 100 to 199, and they are complying with core fundamental principles and conceptual framework that how we should proceed to read this and to comply with this. The part 2 talks about professional accountants in service, which is a new section altogether added. Now, this particular new section is brought from 200 to 299 section, and this talks about all the necessary requirements or compliance requirements for chartered accountants in service. The part 3 is by and large applicable to practicing chartered accountants. 300 to 399 are the sections. Part 4 is split into two, 4A and 4B. They are basically independent standards divided into 400 to 899 for audit and review engagements, and from 900 to 999 for assurance engagements other than audit and review. So this is how the entire Code of Ethics is being divided. And if you look at the front cover of that particular thing, you can easily make out that all the basic things till now what we have discussed is 100 to 199 or 200 to 299 or maybe 300 to 399. And the independent standards are carved out separately based on the independent standards prescribed by the IEASBA. And then there are two sets of standards for independence. One is independence for audit and review engagements, and one is for independence for assurance engagements other than audit and review engagements. So what's the new thing? 2009 code had only independence assurance engagements. Now we have two separate things. Earlier it was a small section, now entire set of standards. And the biggest change is now various threats to independence are being clearly defined, and as a follower of this Code of Ethics, we need to make sure that we have sufficient documentary evidence in our records to establish that these risks are mitigated by us during a particular assignment. What are these types of threats? Self-interest threat, self-review threat, advocacy threat, familiarity threat, and intimidation threat. And most of us face this difficulty for good number of clients. Like self-interest threat, most of us give services to a particular client which ranges from one type of activity to 10 types of activities, and then obviously there would be a self-interest when it comes to independence as a statutory auditor or maybe as a tax auditor, because we do a lot of other assignments for that client as well. So as a matter of fact, what is expected that how we are mitigating this self-interest threat in a particular client where we are giving multiple services other than audit and assurance engagement is something which is very crucial. Another threat of independence is self-review threat, like whether to accept a client, whether to reject a client, whether to, conclude in a particular fashion. Most of us who are, independent individual chartered accountants, we have this difficulty that, we only do the review. Like we suggest the provision for tax to be done and we audit the same tax provision when it's actually done by the particular client where we are statutory auditors. Now, this particular self-review threat needs to be addressed in most of us cases where, we are the consultants and we are the auditors for a particular client. Advocacy threat, sometimes it happens so that, for getting some work for a particular client, while conducting an audit, we may compromise our independence. So that is a threat which we perceive, and we need to document that how we have overcome that particular threat. Familiarity threat is a very common threat. Like once a client comes to us, generally that client remains with us for a longer duration. So naturally, unless that rotation is required, we are auditing a particular client for a good number of years. We are filing or doing consulting work for a client for a number of years. So then automatically that familiarity threat overtakes. And while keeping independence for testing things, we have to ensure that that familiarity threat is being properly addressed in documentation so that, we would be complying with independence. Intimidation threat, sometimes this happens, so it's an exceptional case, but a client may, put a threat for independent audit report. And because of that threat, you may be required to compromise in issuing a particular report, which is not your conclusion actually. So there also you need to ensure that there was no intimidation threat, or if at all there was an intimidation threat, how you have mitigated that while addressing and concluding your audit report is something which is very, very important to document. So what has been brought as a change is we have to do a lot of documentation with respect to maintenance of independence in an assignment, especially an assurance assignment or an assignment which is other than audit or review, like say agreed upon procedure or issuance of certificate, which is an absolute assurance nature assignment, or SRS or standard or related services or standard or other services. Anything applies to that. If those kind of assignments, how we are keeping ourselves independent of that client and how we are addressing these various threats is something which is required to be documented at a length. Another change is, like there are three things which are deferred. One is NOCLA. Then second is, doing a lot of other than tax audit work for a tax client, and our contribution from a particular client or a group, which is above certain percentage for consecutive 2 years, then we may have to report it to those charged with governance or the ICAI. So these were deferred up to 30th September, but since today we are on 23rd of December, as of now, these are applicable. So in case of NOCLA, non-compliance with laws and regulations, the requirement is like while providing a professional service to a client or an employer, a professional accountant may come across instance of non-compliance with laws and regulations or suspected NOCLA committed or about to be committed by the client or the employer or by those charged with governance or management or employees of the client or the employer, then there is a requirement to assess it and to report it. So it is not something that we need to audit multiple things, but during our audit, based on compliance requirements with standards on auditing, audit program, requirements with respect to CARO or other applicable acts, wherever we come across an instance of non-compliance, then we cannot keep our eyes closed and we have to take an appropriate step to make a mention somewhere. Now, accepting that professional accountant has a prima facie ethical responsibility not to turn a blind eye to the matter, this NOCLA was introduced to guide him to deal with the situation, considering how best to serve the public interest in these circumstances. So if we are aware about a non-compliance, if you are aware about certain happening or mishap, and then you are ignoring it while writing a report, that is what is not expected. You can very well ignore it, provided you sufficiently document it in your record. And based on that documentation, you are of the opinion that this is not a material thing, and that is being prescribed in the code further. Laws and regulations having nexus to professional accountants, professional training and expertise, that is having direct effect on the determination of material amounts and disclosures in the financial statements, compliance of which fundamental to the entity's business, and compliance necessary to avoid material penalties. So any non-compliance of this nature has to be identified and brought to the notice and then appropriately dealt with. A non-compliance would be like some examples the International Ethical Standards Board of Accountants have given is like fraud, corruption and bribery, money laundering, terrorist financing, proceeds of crime, securities markets and trading, banking and other financial products and services, data protection, environmental protection, public health and safety, tax and pension liabilities and payments, etc. So wherever broadly they have recommended this, ICAI would come out with certain specific guidelines with respect to these in near time. Then it will be really helpful for us to, tick box that when we actually do the assignment for March this year. So primarily what their concern is that if there is anything alarming, anything which would, cause any of these non-compliances, then certainly an auditor should not turn a blind eye, and they should, investigate that matter further and to find out whether it requires a mention in your audit report as a non-compliance with law and regulations. That is what is expected from all of us. Also,
Niranjan, if I can just intervene for a second, if you can go back to the previous slide. It talks about tax and pension liabilities and payments. So suppose, let's take an example just to clarify the situation. In case somebody is delaying payment of advance tax deliberately, so there is a profit, but due to some, say, liquidity concerns or something, the company is deliberately short paying advance tax, but ultimately they are going to pay the complete payment, maybe as a self-assessment. So whether that would get hit by this provision, because we need to understand the depth of the non-compliance which we are actually talking about.
See, actually, that's where I came from. Like I said that there are certain examples which are given, but the implementation guide has to come, because it has to be judgmental. Like if it is going to impact your financial statements, then yes, answer is yes, But if you make a sufficient provision and there is only a delay, then it may not be the normal case. It will be going as it is. So when it comes to your knowledge, you have to assess whether it is going to impact on your true and fair view when you are doing a statutory audit or an independent audit, and that's where you would judge it. Simply it's a non-compliance, then that does not. Like say, for example, you have deducted the tax and not paid. Now, obviously, they will have a penalty of say some percent when they file it delayed, etc. But would it really impact if it is done prior to 31st March or even prior to your signing of an audit? You write it differently in 3CD, right? So it depends. It's going to be very judgmental, and it would be really tough to make a rule like a fraud, but the amount is only 1 lakh. And if it is not a material amount as per your benchmarking of materiality as per standards on auditing, would you really bring it here? Answer would be very difficult, So what I believe, it needs to evolve over a period of time. Since it was deferred for 2 years, not much of deliberations have happened onto this. But say, for example, a money laundering case, and you are aware that there is a money laundering case going on, then certainly you cannot close your eyes. That's what is the expectation of NOCLA. So primarily your say tax audit report kind of a format like 3CD, or in case of banks and insurance companies, you have long form audit report, or in case of companies, you have CARO or internal financial controls. There are additional questions we have been answering as an auditor, So this would be something which would be in addition to that. There would be one more step further where we come across such non-compliances. I think we need to judge it based on our experience, based on the volume of work we are handling at that particular client's level. What is the materiality level and what would be the level at which it would impact, and then we may probably have some responsibility to report that, I think. I hope I'm addressing your issue, Lokesh.
Yeah. Actually, of course,
Yeah.
as you said,
Because it would be too judgmental, because saying
right.
yes or no would be very tough.
So the implementation guide would really help us in giving a
Or
guidance to
or
the.
or or the way independent standards are prescribed, the threat has to be mitigated by sufficient documentation. So ultimately, we have to fall in line with the judgment thing, which we also otherwise do for true and fair view. Whether this particular NOCLAR, which has come to our knowledge, whether that is being properly taken care of in books of accounts, or would it require a special attention to the readers from our audit report is something what we need to judge. It can't be only anything which tick box you can do, like, yes, there is a fraud. But that fraud, whether that has a material impact, that also needs to be tested. Or corruption or a bribery or a money laundering or a terrorist financing or a proceeds of crime. Now, I would compare the terrorist financing and proceeds of crime, even if it is of a material nature or not a material nature, it would certainly trigger my testing. And maybe I may have to report it. That could be my viewpoint. It depends, there would be a lot of judgments involved in it. So we'll look at how the people have done it in the past, and now we would also look for guidance from our ICI on this, because there would be a lot of questions which we will all have in our minds about NOCLAR. So can we proceed?
Yeah. Please, Niranjan, please.
Yeah. So that's where I bring into, the matters which will not be brought into NOCLAR. One is clearly inconsequential. So again, we'll have to go back to maturity and risk assessment. If we believe that the point which has been observed by our team, which has come to our eyes, whether it is inconsequential, if yes, then naturally we will not pursue that. So that will not be part of NOCLAR. Personal misconduct unrelated to the business activities will not be. Like many a times we face this difficulty, something is wrong with the director or a partner, but the partnership firm or the company, there is nothing. So they have identified it, like personal misconduct unrelated to the business activities certainly would not become part of our NOCLAR requirements. Also, non-compliance other than by the client or the employer. The professional accountant to address NOCLAR only when and if he or she encounters that the same is in course of providing a professional service to a client. So if somebody, doing an audit or a review or another assurance engagement, during that, if you get it, then only you have a responsibility to report in NOCLAR. That's another point which is mentioned here. So in 2019 code, it has been initially made applicable to auditors, employees of listed companies, listed entities in India. So naturally, as per this revised requirements, we will have to fall in line with these requirements and will follow with NOCLAR from this financial year. Sorry. Also, the second point which I was mentioning was, taxation services to audit clients. And there has been a lot of discussions going on wherever we interact on code of ethics. We face this. Like 2009 code, the requirement was like taxation to audit client includes compliance planning, provision of formal taxation opinions and assistance in the resolution of tax disputes. Such assignments are generally not seen to create threats to independence. Now coming to 2019 code, further guidance is given on identifying and assessing self-review or advocacy threat with respect to such services provided by, you have to assume that if you are doing a tax audit and also giving these services, then you have to test whether this would create a threat to your independence. And if answer is yes, then you need to mitigate that risk and create enough documentation so that your working papers would be sufficient to mention that your audit was carried out independently. Tax return preparation, usually it's not a threat perceived, so there is no need to identify and assess whether this creates any self-review threat or an independence threat. Tax calculation for the purpose of preparing accounting entries that will subsequently be audited by the same firm, it creates a self-review threat, and one must make sure that it is being tested thoroughly. If you remember, I gave the same example, if you are a tax auditor in a client and you are a consultant as well. So you suggest them to make a provision for tax. and that same provision is tested by your team as an auditor, then certainly there is a self-review threat. So you'll obviously have to display an independence, saying that my audit team, which was carrying out the audit of this particular client, was different than my tax consulting team, which has given them advice for preparing this particular type of computation, and according to which X amount of provision is being carried out. So at present, the 2019 code doesn't say that you cannot do it, but what improvement they have done over 2009 code of ethics is that if there is a threat to independence, it probably may be identified as a self-review threat or an advocacy threat, and you need to document it enough, saying that this particular activity is not creating a threat to my independence, so I'm still continuing with both the activities. Similarly, tax planning, other tax advisory services, like a lot of us give, tax planning advice or any other advice to a particular client. And if we are auditing that particular client for, say, tax audit, then it might create a self-review or an advocacy threat. What is a self-review threat? We have understood from the previous example that I am suggesting to do something and the same thing is verified by me as an auditor, like tax provision or accounting for a particular method of, item of accounts for the consideration of taxation laws, etc. So that self-review threat needs to be addressed by one simple method, is that you have two separate teams which deals with it. Similarly, advocacy threat is a threat which comes under this, where appropriate safeguard is required to be adopted, like using professionals who are not audit team members to perform that service, having an appropriate reviewer, not involved in providing the service of tax planning, other tax advisory services for the review of audit work. So practically, if one individual chartered accountant is providing these services, then it would be really tough for that individual chartered accountant to create such documentation, because mostly the decision for self-review would be based on chartered accountants with working with you. But even if you are a proprietary concern and you have a paid chartered accountant, that may be one area where you can very well say that a consulting was provided by a team headed by that chartered accountant, and audit is being carried out by the team which is headed by the proprietor who is looking after the audit. Something of that kind we can work out. But the expectation is that you have to identify a particular type of threat to the independence when we are providing bundled services to a client along with tax audit. Tax services involving valuations might perform only when the result of valuation will not have a direct effect on the financial statements. Then it's allowed. Otherwise, it is certainly considered as a threat and it will not be conducted. Assistance in the resolution of tax disputes might create a self-review or an advocacy threat. Appropriate safeguards to be adopted is, not to provide if involves acting as advocate for audit client, or amounts involved are material to the financial statements on which the firm expresses an opinion. Now, this is also a point where a lot of debate has been happening in the past as well. Like, say, I am signing a tax audit report, and then after submission of that tax audit report, in case of assessments or appeals or higher level, I'm the one who is, again representing tax department. So certainly there is an advocacy threat or a self-review threat. An audit which I have carried out independently, now I am, in a consultant situation and I am representing the same client for those transactions. So here, these two types of threats in taxation services, self-review and advocacy, needs to be addressed. And I think most of us should make sure that wherever we have more number of partners, that independence while conducting an audit and independence while doing the consulting activities needs to be thoroughly maintained. Another important factor which has come to the discussion on NOCLA, tax and fees. 3 were deferred up to September 22. So in the revised code, where 2 or consecutive years, total gross annual professional fees from the audit client and its related entities represent more than 15%, now it's amended to 40% of total fees, the firm shall disclose to those charged with governance or to ICAI format yet to be prescribed. Meaning thereby, say for example, if you have a total fee of 1 crore and there is a client of yours, which entire group, the total professional annual fees which you get from that client are more than 40%, like 40 lakhs for consecutive 2 years, then there would be a prescribed format which ICAI would recommend, and then you'll have to submit it to ICAI. Now, the expectation by this is, you must identify yourself that even after there is a threat, because, it's a substantial amount of portion of fees which is coming from a particular client, how you are maintaining that independence by addressing those threats which would be there, like there would be certainly a self-review threat because you have a substantial portion of fees coming from that particular client. So independence is questioned. Also, there would be additional work which will be coming to you from that client because they form part of substantial fees of your total professional fees. So naturally, there would be a threat to your independence. So this is something which, there would be more clarification expected from ICAI so that, we all can fall in line with the requirements for compliance with this particular clause. But by and large, most of the listed entities in anticipation of this 15% have already, started configuring, their appointment criteria also. Because I came across a couple of, cases where, this question was asked to a proposed auditor whether my fees, which would be falling in line with your changes of COE or not, like would it be attracting this 15% benchmarking? But now since it's 40%, there is a substantial increase envisaged. So it is expected that somebody who is giving you 40% or more fees of your total fees for a consecutive period of 2 years, then certainly you have to address a threat to independence when you do audit and assurance services to that particular client. More is expected on these lines from ICAI because the format is yet to be prescribed. The timing at which the disclosure needs to be done is required to be explained. So I hope in due course of time we would get this and we would get some answers also on these three points which we discussed, which were deferred earlier, but which would be applicable from the mid-year, that is after 1st of October, these all are applicable. Another important factor which has come into this is, documentation. 2009 code requires firms to document their conclusions regarding compliance with independence requirement. And I hope most of us who have gone through the peer review process as a peer reviewer or a practice unit which has undertaken peer review, I think we all have a standard independence declaration from partners or the proprietors. And then we have a standard practice to update that in a year's time. So that was the basic requirement. But now in this 2019 code, the requirement of documentation is given in greater detail. And all the steps which are taken for responding to NOCLA, etc., responding to these various threats of independence are also required to be documented thoroughly so that, you can demonstrate if anybody wants to look at how the independence is maintained by a particular professional. Also, there was no such ceiling on total fees of the firm if such fees does not exceed 5 lakhs. So 40% means, certainly total fees ka 40% if it is not more than 5 lakhs, then this particular clause will not be applicable. And this total fees would not be applicable in case of audit of government companies, public sector undertakings, nationalized banks, public financial institutions, or government appointments, where the fees are being decided by some standards which are being defined. So this is what is exemption. Also, the criteria for indebtedness was like earlier defined. Now, more concept of materiality of loans and guarantees being brought into, and whether a loan or a guarantee is material would depend on the combined net worth of the individual and immediate family members, which is adopted in 2019. Application of safeguard is required where necessary to eliminate the threats and not to say that don't accept it. Like most of us who are tax practitioners would get the feeling that we cannot do it. So answer is no. You can perfectly do multiple assignments even if you are doing tax audit, but you have to make sure that for other than filing the income tax return, whatever advisory work, consulting work you are doing for a particular client where also doing tax audit, you must make sure that you should identify what types of threats, like self-review and advocacy threats, are the two threats which are commonly applicable to this, and you have maintained it or reduced it to an acceptable level, what kind of safeguards you have maintained, and even if it is the threat is there, it was clearly insignificant, are the things you should document. Now, this is something which is an additional thing for most of us who are doing multiple services for a client, along with a tax audit, would be largely applicable. Also, public interest entity is a new concept which is defined. It includes listed entities as well as banks, insurance companies, etc. So, the code starts with, initial applicable to the auditors who are auditing, these public interest entities or banks or insurance companies. Also, firms are encouraged to determine whether to treat an additional entity as PIE because of large number of stakeholders. So again, it's an option given to us. Also, inducements, gifts, hospitality. There is a detailed chapter, additional things being, elaborated. First, see whether prohibited by law and regulation, whether inducements are being listed there, are being covered. Offering also prohibited, not only receiving, offering is also prohibited. Reasonable and informed third-party test needs to be carried out to see whether it is in the intent of the improperly influence of the behavior of the recipient or another individual. Clarifications about appropriate boundaries for offering and accepting inducements extended to PAs in service also, and total prohibition in case of audit assurance clients to continue. Obviously, earlier also in 2009 code, we had mentioned that gifts cannot be accepted or unduly hospitality will not be considered. The same thing will be done. Obviously, claiming TADA will not be part of it, or a client which is not in the town where you are located, making an arrangement for travel to and fro and stay and arrangements, that kind of things, which are normal parcel of your regular assignment, will not be certainly part of it. But this is something which I wanted to cover primarily on code of ethics and the way forward. So from this point onwards, my presentation talks about some of the commonly asked questions and their answers, which are otherwise also published by ICI, and you could see the document where from I'm picking it up. So Lokeshji, if there is any question which we need to address specifically, we may take it up right now up to the revised code or any concern. Then we can move to some of the FAQs. How would you suggest?
I think there are no questions which I can
No
see.
questions because okay, fine. Because there will links on chat box were coming, so I thought there were something. I couldn't see chat box actually. I couldn't open it. I think most of them have written their name and membership number in that chat box. Okay, fine. Because I was, getting that chat box signal that it is.
No, a lot of people actually, we keep on reminding people that we don't need your membership numbers here, but they want to ensure that their CPRs are credited, so they will make it double sure. Documentation actually, I think. So they have taken it on heart actually.
Sure. So we'll proceed further with some of the FAQs. Frequently asked questions on ethical issues certainly gives us a upper hand in compliance with the ethical issues. And this is an old publication already available on website of ICI. We can download it, and this also helps us in understanding the code effectively. So let's take up some of the questions which are of an interest to all. Here I would request that in chat box people can write answer, and if somebody wants to speak, also can speak probably, and one of you can volunteer for it. Like communication with previous auditors. Now, what is the requirement? Like, can anybody elaborate on the requirements? Like, in which type of audits? What do you mean by previous auditors? Yes or no? What happens in case of government companies or banks? Time limit is short. What to do? What is the mode of communication? 4 or 5 questions comes to our mind when it comes to communication with previous auditors. So anybody wants to take up? Maybe just quickly write in chat box, or maybe can speak up. Lokeshji, can we allow somebody to speak?
Yeah. So anybody can just speak. We have no hindrance here.
Oh, okay, great.
So somebody has sent Ishaji through email in case of statutory audit.
Very good.
Ishaji's view.
Very good. Good answer.
Deepak is saying
very nice.
through registered post.
Very good. See, this proves that, people are aware of code of ethics. They have read it sometimes back. Otherwise, they'll not reproduce it like this. I'm happy that people are aware that, yes, in SAT audit, we take previous auditors, communication about whether professional objection they have for our accepting the assignment. But typically, if you read this particular provision, my question also says that communication with previous auditors. So we have to remember that auditors means not necessarily statutory auditors. It can be any type of auditors. So clause 8 of part 1 of the first schedule, a chartered accountant in practice who is appointed as an auditor should communicate in writing with a CA who was previously holding that position before accepting such appointment. So, sometimes, I receive an appointment letter as a stock auditor, and then I write to a previous stock auditor. Then they are surprised when I get a phone call from them. That what's the idea? Why are you asking my NOC? I'm not a statutory auditor. Sometimes I do an internal audit and I write to the previous auditor, and they say that it's not applicable to a statutory auditor. But if you go through the code, it is very clearly mentioned that auditor, an auditor encompasses whether it's statutory auditor, internal auditor, or any other auditor. So my request to you all is to start this practice of communicating in case of any other assignment where your term is auditor. This applies to tax auditor, this applies to internal auditor, this applies to a stock auditor, this applies to an information system auditor. So it's applicable to all types of audits. And position previously held is not necessarily the previous year auditor, Like this happens in case of tax audits, Like in 1 year, the client may be covered by tax audit. Second year, the client may not be covered in the tax audit. In the third year, the client may be covered again in the tax audit. So here, it's not the previous years, it's the previous tax auditor we need to check, So there is an additional thing which we need to look at, and this is the advantage of looking at FAQs, Like we elaborately understand what are the do's and don'ts about a particular requirement. Also, the communication is required to be made before acceptance of audit. And mode of communication could be registered post with an AD. So somebody had given a correct answer. Also now email is permitted or a hand delivery. Ultimately, reaching to that particular person is something which is very important. This is a good question, sir, what if I have received the resignation of the previous auditor? Still, I need to send emails separately. Ideally, yes, because you really don't know where from you have received that communication. So it's always good to send a direct communication to the previous auditor and then take their email or written confirmation that they don't have really any objection to it, rather than client providing you the previous auditor's confirmation. Also, relaxation given for government or bank audits. Auditor can send conditional acceptance to the client, making it clear that their acceptance is subject to professional objection by previous auditor, and then persuade with the previous auditor to get it if there is a delay. Also, non-payment of undisputed audit fees to previous auditor is something which nowadays most of us are getting it either on side. Like if we are the previous auditor, we give a confirmation to the new incoming auditor that there are no undisputed audit fees pending. Or when we are incoming auditors and we obtain a NOC from the previous auditor, we ask for whether there are any undisputed audit fees of a previous auditor. So this is something which you should also continue to do as per the revised code of ethics. So I think this is how the FAQs are dealt with. I've got a few more questions, I think. There's a question called, does ICAI maintain email ID and mobile number so that it's easy to search and communicate with previous auditors? I think, in my opinion, if there is no response, then you should give one more letter to that previous auditor with a register AD. You have to make sure that it is delivered, and in that you may probably add words like if within 7 days, within 10 days, within 15 days, anything which you believe reasonable and which you are following consistently. If objection is not received, then it will be considered to be an objection, and then you can move forward probably. Only thing, evidence to document that it is being delivered to that particular previous auditor. Another question which has come is that does ICI maintain a database? I don't know whether ICI maintains a database, but practically the previous auditor's details are given to you by the client, and based on that communication, you are supposed to connect with the new client, so that they would obviously. I also face this difficulty. There is another question like various times we call on retiring auditors, but they do not respond. So we have to accept our audit with a conditional letter. As I said, you may write a negative assurance in that report saying that if we do not receive your confirmation in 7 days, it will be considered as you have no objection on our appointments. Only thing you should make sure. Yeah.
I think they are saying about telephonic conversation. So I think it is important that it is documented through an email or a.
Yeah, I'm coming to that. Like email is the best module. Physical delivery of the letter and getting an acceptance or a register AD are the three things. Even if you speak to them and they give, then naturally you can document and minute it that I spoke to so and so partner of so and so firm. Ideally, no limit. Again, this rule cannot be defined like it should be 7 days or 15 days. A reasonable time should be worked out, and that depends on your consistently followed number of days. You can very well do 15 days is a reasonable time for them to revert to you saying that whether they have an objection or not. Sometimes a mail is not received. I always suggest that take help of your IT team member. Whenever you write a mail, that delivery of that mail can be obtained. There's an option with us. So if you do not get it, then that is not sufficient. Then there has to be a physical delivery or a delivery which would be through a register AD, and then that acknowledgement is kept on our record. That is something which is very crucial. If there is no response, then the reminder with a condition that probably within so and so dates, if you do not respond, then we probably will not do it.
Niranjan, one more question I think we just missed, which is somebody asking in case some auditor has resigned voluntarily, whether in that case also communication is mandatory.
Yes, I said I have answered that question. Like resignation is received by the management, and management has informed you that auditor has resigned. So you have to make sure that you independently write to that particular auditor and get their confirmation in writing. I have already answered that question, sir.
Okay, and one more question which I think is very relevant here, but I thought somebody would ask, is that if he responds negatively, if the auditor responds negatively, he has some objection in terms of sometimes that my fees is not paid, or objection in terms of he telling ki bhai, they do not provide documents or the records are not complete, something of that sort. So then what would be the response? Can we still accept? So this,
no.
I just thought, I think
you should be ready to say no to it, because if somebody who is giving you a warning, not possible. First is certainly not possible. If the audit fees are not paid, you cannot accept the assignment. Other is subjective, like sometimes auditors get a conditional acceptance. So subsequently, you'll have to wait for the settlement of their fees. Now, fees also can be multiple, like as I said, we provide multiple services to one audit client. So audit fees is something which the standard provides. Beyond audit fees, we are not supposed to look at. Because that's the contractual obligation as a service provider,
I think there's another point which sometimes people call us up and ask, sir, kya kare? So sometimes what happens is they complain that say X fees is mentioned in the financial statements, and that the client has paid. So they are showing evidence also of having paid that X fees. So there's nothing payable as per the books of account, but the auditor claims that say an X sum is further payable to him for the which services which he has rendered. So then
exactly. For those services, it would be termed as a simple creditor, and that has to be not considered. Stat audit fees is something which is mentioned here, so only to that extent. Even when you ask for an NOC request, you have to mention whether any statutory fee. That too, if it is disputed, that's fine. That can be settled subsequently. Undisputed, if it is pending, then you have a responsibility. That's the code itself is very clear,
Right. So I also felt the same, but I think that's something which, yeah, is very important for people to know that.
There's a very interesting question which has come up. NOC request received from new auditor without having membership number and name of the auditor. Is it valid? I think you all know the answer very well. Why should I answer it? Like, what is your answer? Can you just type out yes or no? Whoever has asked this question.
Manuban, MD, sir, please, if you could
I
just
should see that now. Sir, you
type
could
out
write
or
the
you can
answer,
just
please.
speak also. There is no issue.
Then all of us can answer this question. Why only I should answer? Like, if somebody who has decided to appoint a new auditor, whether they display the membership number or not, what is your job is to give a NOC specifying whether you have any objection. So if there is no objection, professional or otherwise, and you have been paid your stat audit fees, I think there is no point in not giving a. See, there is no need of justifying undisputed fees. Like undisputed audit fees is what they have mentioned. So fees and undisputed audit fees has got a lot of difference. And that's where most of the cases keep on happening. So if I have not paid the statutory audit fees, then I would certainly give an NOC which is conditional. If there is a dispute, then still I can give saying that there is a dispute going on and that will be decided by somebody, like an arbitrator or maybe court of law. Till that time, audit cannot be held up. So I can give an NOC specifying that this is something which is pending. But if there is an undisputed audit fee which is normally not paid, then I cannot give an NOC. I would say that pay my fees first and then you can, do the audit. So undisputed audit fee is what mentioned in the course. So make sure that that is something which needs to be looked into.
There is one more question, Niranjan, in between.
Yeah.
It says, can an auditor,
The chat box.
statutory auditor can certify annual return in form under ROC?
But how this question is related to the topic which we are discussing?
It is not really relevant.
Because currently it is related to NOC, So they may elaborate the question and then may probably see there are 300 plus services which we can provide. And that is mentioned in, if you remember, I said this, like we have got so many services which we can provide to a particular client. So that is being defined by ICAI in the basic code also, and also a separate publication. So if it is permitted there, why not? You can very well do it. But if it is not permitted there, then certainly it will not be.
There's one question again, but I think it is, you have already answered, but is NOC required to do the audit of a trust?
Yes, NOC from previous auditor. So now stat audit, internal audit, any auditor, not only previous year's auditor. Like sometimes you get a chance to do audit of a branch in a bank environment where for last 3 years there is no auditor. You have to find out what is the 4th year auditor and try to reach to him or her. Sometimes it's tough. So let's move on. Otherwise, we'll discuss for this only one NOC we can go on discussing. So maybe next question is, can we issue a press advertisement? Can somebody type it out in chat box? Yes or no? And if yes, is there any specific provision you can share? Because generally when we see chartered accountants means no advertisement, no press release, etc. Okay, good. Let us see this. We can do it through write-ups, It's provided in the code. Most of us are not aware. We can very well do it within the permitted framework of ICAI, and that's write-ups. We can publish write-ups. Look at this. Can be allowed giving factual information regarding for changes in partnership, address, advertisement for recruiting staff of the members, and write-up. And that's the reason I've kept it bold. We'll see that in next couple of slides. Consider the need of interpersonal socialization, relationship of members through such get-togethers, occasions, advertisement for silver, golden, diamond, platinum, or centenary celebrations, and members' firms are prohibited from inserting advertisement for soliciting clients and professional work. So one answer which was very true, not for audit profile by Varun Tyagiji was also correct. Not for specific generation of professional work or soliciting clients, but otherwise, general term, yes. Look at this. A member is not permitted to issue a classified advertisement in journal, is permitted in journal and newsletter. So in newsletter, there is a separate section where chartered accountants can say whatever they want to. But it's for the circulation of chartered accountants mostly, right? Notice in the press relating the success of an examination, an individual candidate should not contain any element of undesired publicity. So their name of the firm, etc., may not be mentioned. There's a question already come up, what is write-up, So I thought, so I'll give one slide on write-up so that, you can clarify that. Like a chartered accountant in practice may advertise through a write-up, setting out services provided by him or his firm and the particulars subject to such guidelines as may be issued by the council. Write-up means the writing of particulars as per the guidelines set out setting out services, names of clients not permitted, rendered by the members of the firm, and any writing or display of the particulars of the members' firms issued, circulated or published by way of print or electronic mode or otherwise, including in newspapers, journals, magazines, and websites, which include social networking websites, in push as well as pull mode, in accordance with the guidelines. This is available in Code of Ethics. You can go through it and you may certainly find it useful. We can very well do it. So to this extent, which is permitted by the council, is allowed. Other than that, is not allowed. So I thought I'll share this code, and in the Code of Ethics book also you will find it. So anyways, I'll be sharing it with Lokesh, what the material I wanted to circulate. In that there is a PDF file available. So probably one can look at that and fall in line with what can be done and what cannot be done. A chartered accountant in practice shall not advertise his professional attainments or services or uses any designation or expression other than chartered accountant on professional documents, visiting cards, letterheads, or signboards. So achievements and all not permitted. And if a member has passed any additional degrees, courses, print qualification on this. This is a new question. So the previous two were related to advertisement and publicity. So I thought I'll just share with you about the write-ups. So this is, I think, a thing which is not being covered by us mostly. So we'll have a look at it and we will probably look whether we can do this. So now let's take this question, because this is something which nowadays, whenever somebody exchanges a card, I see a lot of degrees written on that, and sometimes it goes into 3 or 4 lines also. So the question is, if a member has passed any additional degrees, courses, course of ICI, is he permitted to print such qualification on visiting cards, letterheads, and other stationery? So here I would divide this question into 3 categories, First is whether degrees can be mentioned. So let us say I have taken a degree from university, I've taken a degree of doctorate, I've taken another degree from another professional course, etc. Something of that kind. Yes, very nice answer. That can be permitted. Third is, second is, a lot of courses conducted by ICI, Kunalji has also yes, very nice. Yes is the correct answer. Degrees, by and large, there would be published by law in India or recognized by the central government or title indicating membership. Only that is permitted. So degrees of university established by law, recognized by the central government, or a title indicating membership of ICI or any other institution has been recognized by the central government, then that is generally allowed. It's a blanket permission. What about courses? Oh, good. Already one answer has come. Courses, no. Can you differentiate between courses? There are 2 types of courses ICI conducts. So other courses certainly not covered, so they are not to be done. Now, wherever ICI conduct courses, there are 2 types of courses. One, their nature of diploma, and one in the nature of certificate course. So in that light, can you revise your answer, Lokeshji? And also others can also answer whether diplomas can be written, certificate courses can be written.
So I think basically if it amounts to a degree, like in case of DISA, basically. So you can mention these. But say if I've done a concurrent audit course or some other course, say NPO course or something, that I cannot mention.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Somebody saying diplomas can be mentioned. Very good answer, Dhirendra ji. Ashish ji, below diploma can be written. Very good answer. Yes, absolutely right. What Lokesh you have said. The diplomas like DISA, DIRM, or that management program which is conducted for young members, that can be very well written. But the certificate courses cleared by ICAI cannot be mentioned. And nowadays, there is a common practice that we write this in our, by and large, most of us, like certificate course on X, Y, Z, there are 20 certificate courses. So this is something which is very important for all of us. Can a member in practice indicate in a book or an article authored, contributed, published by him or her his association with any firm of chartered accountants? So now these answers are, I'm hoping that these new answers which are coming in chat boxes for this particular question. Can a member in practice indicate in a book or article authored, contributed? Wow, somebody is writing membership number.
So let me again clarify, we don't need your membership number, so please don't write it here.
Correct, you're right, Dhirenji. That cannot be. Answer is no, absolutely right. As per para E under clause 6, member is not permitted to indicate in a book or an article authored, contributed, published that the association with firm of chartered accountants. It's not permitted. Can a chartered accountant provide portfolio management services as part of CA practice? Again, these FAQs are based on cases which are, decided either in favor of the member or against the member. Two answers already come. No. No, absolutely right. Not permitted. The explanation is very clear that management consultancy and other services appearing does not, cover activities of broking, underwriting, and portfolio management. So expressly mentioned in the code. So one cannot cover this portfolio management services as a practicing chartered accountant. Now this is something where we'd like to spend 10 minutes because largely we get such kind of requests from members that our clients want to give reports, project reports. Answer is no, Sumit ji. Your question is very valid. Can a CA firm mention number of years of practice on the letterhead? Answer is no. They cannot demonstrate anything on the letterhead except what is permitted. They can publish it in a newspaper that we have completed 50 years for celebration. That's fine. Letterhead, no. But I mean, this question I can't answer on this program, so we'll skip it, Sumit. You may, it's a difficult question to ask, and difficult question to answer as well. Whether CA can certify project reports? Maybe quick answer. Answer is no by Sumit, Kunal, Isha. Chandraprakash is saying should not. No, cannot certify. Very nice. But we get a lot of requests, like a lot of clients come to us and say that, boss, stamp to marna is pe. Wo stamp to laga do. Even RBI in one of the RTI requirements have clarified in 2021 that they do not insist any project report to be signed or certified by the chartered accountants. But there is a method in which we can very well do it. So we have to understand what is the difference between a report and a certificate. A report means simply an expression of opinion after inquiry, examination, or review of specified matters. When it is essays, then it's a historical information. But we can very well do in standards on assurance engagement and standards on related services. Maybe one of them is SAE 3400, where we can do examination of prospective financial information and issue a format in which it is prescribed in that particular standard, a report on all these projections based on assumptions. So those best estimates can be based on SAE 3400, but certainly a round stamp and a sign, not acceptable, it's not permitted. Also, SAE 3402 can talk about, assurance reports and controls at service organization. That also can be provided for user entities and their auditors on controls and services organizations. Also, SAE 3420 assurance engagements to report on compilation of pro forma financial information required to be included in prospectus. And also we can issue based on SRS, like engagement to perform agreed upon procedure and compilation engagements. But there has to be a format which is prescribed as per the requirements of these standards, and one of them covers project report, future estimates based on SAE 3400. So it's very limited applicable. Round stamp and a sign is absolutely not acceptable. Answer is no, Sumiji. We can give report on mathematical accuracy of the projection as compilation engagement, provided you fall in line with all the other requirements of that SRS 4410. Then answer is yes. Otherwise, mathematical accuracy of projection cannot be given unless you give the assumptions attached with it. So that's the condition. Otherwise, you are absolutely right. There is a standard on related services 4410, which will talk about compilation engagements, and you can very well do it. We'll move to the next question. Can a member in practice be part of AOP with other members or other professionals? I think this is the simplest of the one. Somebody saying yes. With respect to the multidisciplinary, I would agree that as yes. Other than that, answer is no. So unless it is multidisciplinary as permitted by ICAI, not permissible. That's very clear. You cannot become partner of an AOP unless it is a requirement for multi-purpose, multidisciplinary membership, etc. But that also does not specify this form. It specifies LLP, practicing as a private limited company or a limited company or a partnership firm. So practically AOP, not our case. Can a chartered accountant in practice pay to any other person any share, commission or brokerage in the fees or profits of professional business? This is also another simple question I thought I'll take up. So I've seen, a lot of people have been suffered because of this. In between, there was one case where, a conglomerate was formed and a lot of chartered accountants were given some job to do some work, etc. Absolutely right. You are right. Perfect. No is the correct answer, Clause 2 of Part 1 of the first schedule to the Act prohibits a chartered accountant from paying or allowing any share, commission or brokerage in fees or profits of his professional business to any other person other than a member of ICAI. So it's very clearly spelled out in the Part 1 of the first schedule that it cannot be. Can a practicing chartered accountant secure any professional business through the services of a person who is not employee or a partner? Also, on the similar lines, the answer is no, that it cannot be done unless either it's a chartered accountant employee or a chartered accountant partner with whom you can deal with on such lines. Whether a member in practice can respond to tenders, advertisements, and circulars. And this is something which is very interesting, So we'll take this question for members. Yes or no? Yes. Yes. Good. 2 in favor of yes. 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 Any restrictions on yes? Is it a conditional yes or it's a blanket yes? Oh, somebody saying no. Fine. Friends, it's a conditional yes. It's not a blanket yes. So there are guidelines provided by ICAI. It is permitted as per provision 2 of clause 6 of part 1 of the first schedule that council guidelines dated 7th April 2016. I have given a link here. So one can click on this link and you will come to know that if it's a tender where only chartered accountants are being called for, then minimum fees needs to be prescribed. And then obviously you can very well apply for a tender, and in that tender, the basic, yes, subject to approval of ICAI, correct, conditional, yes. Very good answers. So here the condition is that if it's a tender restricted to only chartered accountants, then the minimum fees needs to be prescribed by the entity which is asking for the tender. And when there is a competition for others, there is no such restrictions. And then the guidelines to be followed by the members is being clearly elaborated by ICAI in its council guidelines dated 7th April 2016. I think a very valid point raised by one participant. What purpose is achieved by restricting CAs with so many courts? No other professional advocates or doctors. Like we started with saying this, like do's on don'ts. Like mostly when we read code, it's don'ts, you know. But there are certain do's also. Like as I said, more than 350 services we can provide. We can advertise with a restricted manner. So there is a write-up provided. So there are dues also provided. This is not the right forum where I can answer this question, but we must ask the ICAI this question, and they will probably tell us the same thing which I am trying to tell, that there are certain dues also which we may, fall in line with. Like here earlier, there was a blanket restriction on applying for tenders. But subsequently, they realized that this is the only method in which a lot of entities wants to give the work. So the guidelines have come. Now we can participate and we can do a lot of things which can be done by us. We'll move to the next question. Is there any ceiling on number of tax audit assignments that can be taken? And this is, I think, where I would certainly like your views. Like, do we have any restriction on number of tax audit? If yes, how it works? Is there any guideline by ICAI? Yeah, max 60. Very good answer. Vipul, max 60 is a good answer. Yes. Earlier it was 45. Now moved to 60. So one individual can, sign maximum 60 tax audits for a particular year. But there is one more, explanation to this that I wanted somebody to elaborate. 60 is how you work it out. Like one member can sign 60 reports, or one can sign more than 60 reports. Ashok Shetty sir has asked a question which really can't be answered. I agree with you and fully agree that such things should not happen, and we should rely on a minimum benchmark fees which ICAI has recommended. But tough. In case of partnership firm, number of partners into 60. Fantastic. Vipul Jain sir has given a correct answer. That's the current status. Like ICAI has given a clarification on how to identify this number of tax audits. Like earlier it was 45, now the number is 60. But when it's a partnership firm, say 2 partners, then maximum audits you can sign is 120. And then you may choose that one only partner would sign 120 audits, the other partner will not sign any audit. So let's go through quickly. The exercise of the powers of second schedule, clause 1, Central Council Guidelines 2008, chapter 5, which specifies that number of institute in practice, member of the institute in practice shall be deemed to be guilty of professional misconduct if he or she accepts in a financial year more than specified number of tax audit assignments. Number is specified for tax audit is 60, and the FAQ on tax audit assignments clearly specifies the calculation that if there are 10 partners in a firm, then all the partners of the firm can collectively sign 450 tax audit reports. This maximum limit of 450 may be distributed between the partners. Obviously, this example is given when 45, was the limit. Now it's 60, so it should be read as 600 tax audit reports. So one can sign 600, and remaining 10 can sign nil reports. So it's a spread on all. So you can see that below it's mentioned somewhere that council on 2014 decided to increase the specified number of tax audit assignments from 45 to 60. This is available, we can very well look at it. So, nice, correct answers given by good members. Yes, Devesh Upadhyay, you are also right. Correct what you have said is. Simple question for all of you. I think most of us do tax audit, so we are aware of these provisions. Yes. Can a member act as a tax auditor and internal auditor of the same entity? Answer is, I mean, this is a simple question, right? All will get correct answer. No. The council has decided that internal auditor of an assessee, whether working with the organization or independently, cannot be appointed as tax auditor. Very good. Can a concurrent auditor of a bank also undertake the assignment of quarterly review of the same bank? Anybody who does concurrent audit and does get requirements from the bank that you should issue limited review report, please have a look at this. Devesh Upadhyay, your information is correct. It was published. Again, friends, this is also not permitted because both are a different function. One is a stat audit function, one is a internal audit function. But there is a clarification issued by ICAI in 2014, which says that you being a kind of statutory audit undertaking, then that limited review report is not required. But if you're doing like kind of an internal audit, then that internal audit report is accepted. So you cannot issue a limited review report. So go through this guideline, keep it ready, and accordingly give acceptance to the banks which are expecting you to do the review assignment. So you cannot do a review, but as a part of your concurrent audit, you may verify the income, expenditure, asset, liabilities, and then issue a specific format of concurrent audit report, not in the line of quarterly review being conducted by you. So that is being additionally given. Before I end, I would like to take you through some of the recent decisions which are available on the website of ICAI, just for the sake of our understanding, so that we can henceforth visit. So I have already mentioned the link where from I have got this, ICAI.org post ethical standard board. So in that site, you would find the recent decision. I think member in practice cannot act as trademark or patent attorney. Not permissible for a member in practice to accept the appointment of stat audit of a society wherein immediate family members are holding honorary positions. Council decided that for the purpose of appointment of auditor where indebtedness is mentioned, then they have mentioned about what are the conditions. A CA firm may register as a Udyog Aadhar, permission granted. No prohibition for internal auditor to acquire purchase shares of the said company. All this almost 30, So I thought I'll just list it for the benefit of all the members so that, you can have a look at this. Almost 30 items are being listed. All these are very interesting for all of us to note. Also, before I end, there was one more, compliance requirement. Like we had it in the, social media, one message which was doing rounds that, if your previous year audit fees are not paid, you cannot do audit. ICAI has come out with a clarification last year on that, saying that fees overdue appearing in volume 1 specifies that there is no bar on signing the audit report if older fees are pending, But still, I thought I would share with you in social media that SMS was circulated in great numbers that, if your previous year audit fees are pending, then you cannot do audit. So it's not factually correct. So there was a clarification immediately issued by Ethical Standard Board. So I think that's what I had to share on this code of ethics. Their limited application up to 2019 code, as it was applicable up to 30th September, and maybe some of the new things which have come up, which would be applicable from 30th September onwards, like NOCLA, tax audit acceptances along with tax assignments, and maybe the independence through fees for a particular client. The subject is really vast, and I think all of us have got independent views on it. So it was nice to allow me to present my views and also thanks to you participating with, whatever limited mode we had in the chat box. And once again, thanks to Lokesh Bhai and his partners who are and Sumit, I think, who are the conveners for the study circle for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much. Up to you, Lokesh, now.
Thank you, Niranjan ji, for this very, very nice presentation. Now, anybody who has any questions, we have got another 2-3 minutes with him. So that much we can stop Niranjan ji from going. Apart
Certainly,
from which,
certainly, I'm there. We can take questions if at all. I'll try to.
a lot of thanks and praises for you. So, any questions which we have, which we want to ask?
If anybody wants to add something, that is also, you can ask any senior members want to share something or want to add something. So this is something where we are also learning, Always, code of ethics is like every time when you talk, you learn something. I just could see one question. Can we use C as a prefix? Answer is yes. That's permitted.
Oh, there is another question which says, what is the implication of non-completion of CPFs?
That's also mentioned in the website. Then usually there is a penalty that for subsequent year you have to do double of those, something of that kind, So you can go through the ICAI website on CP committee. For Isha, your question is absolutely fine. There is a recent amendment, and there has been some restrictions imposed on how you should appear in, social media. So I think you should go through that guideline. I'll not be able to answer whether you can use CA profile or not there, but certainly there has been recently a guideline issued by ICAI on how you should, appear, what are do's and don'ts for social media. So just refer to that, please.
आगे पेपर स्कैन किया है आपने ले ली हमारे वाले कहाँ है?
Yes, it is on ICAI website. Yes, you can go through ICAI.org, and in the initial page only you will find what is latest being done. So you can very well have a look at it. It's there, or you can search it in ICAI website. You will find it. Latest guideline for social media.
Niranjan ji, if you're just repeating,
I'll try to send a link. I'll try to send you a link of that, please. I have received it. All of us have received it actually. Those who are registered with ICAI on email, you all have received that, I think. I'll just check that.
So, Niranjan ji, one question which I have in mind, because I seem to be too much worried about NOCLA actually. So, SA 250 was already there, which used to talk about other rules and regulation applicable to an organization while conducting an audit. So, how much differentiation in terms of liability on the auditor it comes when we refer to NOCLA? I know we have discussed already that a lot of things need to be understood in terms of maybe an implementation guide which comes from the institute. But if you can just
think you can differentiate that, that's part of your audit responsibility. Here, during the audit, if you come across a particular situation where there is an evident non-compliance, then you cannot close your eyes what the NOCLA is saying. There you have to properly identify what is compliance requirements, incorporate it in your audit, incorporate into your audit program, and then define the rules. Testing is to be carried out, conclusions to be derived. So there 250 says you have to follow the entire audit structure. Here it's about the information which comes to your knowledge that there is a non-compliance. So there is a bit of a difference between the two, But yes, it originates from there. And then there are so many laws, so many things. So I think the slide which I gave where the requirements of ISBA has been defined, like which could be covered, which could be ignored, I think would be more elaborately given by ICAI to us so that we can also fall in line with that. So there has to be, first of all, the importance of materiality needs to be considered, whether it's going to be material and going to have an impact on your overall conclusions. Then only it will be applicable. Number two, as I said, even if it is not material, currently where we stand as a country, I think we are zero tolerant for money laundering, zero tolerant for terrorism activities. So even if that materiality is not there, we may consider it as material because our policy doesn't permit us to do that. So we may even report. So something of that kind, So that judgment we'll have to take. But yes, this is going to take some time for us to understand, study, and incorporate into our audit processes, so that by March we'll be upgrading ourselves and trying to bring in such no clause, if any, to the top of our audit report.
Pankaj ji, for the seminar on standards of auditing, we have on 29th of this month. So you'll receive that email stating that there is a webinar which we have planned on standards of auditing. More session on code of ethics. So Niranjan ji is here, so we'll ask him to give another time, maybe in January, and then we can deliberate more on code of ethics. So we'll definitely try and do that, sir. Is CPR mandatory for members holding COP who is living abroad? I think it is mandatory, sir. You will have to actually refer to their. You go to the CPE website. There is a advisory on the CPR, so you can actually refer to that, and this you can actually do. Any other questions which we need to address to Niranjan, because we have already overshot our time, and Niranjan ji actually has culled out time from his very, very busy schedule, so I don't want to keep him waiting. So any questions which we have here? I don't think there are questions. So thank you, Niranjan ji, once again for this wonderful deliberation which we had today. It was really a pleasure listening to you always, today and always. And as requested by members, we'll trouble you once more maybe in January or Feb, whenever you can actually spare time with us. Because in March, I know you will not be able to spare time. You will have
we will work out something. Sure.
Yeah, surely. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you to all. Thank you to all.
Manish ji, tomorrow webinar is not on standards on auditing. It is on 29th, sir. Okay. I have taken all CPRs through virtual mode. So I would request for all members, because I know CPRs 31st December is the last day. Please refer to your CP website. You can see, so CPRs are basically divided into structured and unstructured CPRs. So please go refer there how many structured and unstructured CPRs you have, and then based upon that you can maybe take a call. But I will request because we were talking about code of ethics. So in that jest, I would request you that don't wait for the last moment. Ultimately, the purpose of having CPRs was that we continue our education, which is very important, and we don't wait for only completion of the CPRs per se. So the purpose is continuing professional education, not really gathering CPRs. So my request is that don't wait for it. So Sumit ji has been kind enough to share the link itself. So anybody can just go there and refer to it. And of course, you can also check what is the CPRs which you have got, because the requirement is into structured and unstructured, and then every year, and then a block of 3 years. So basically, then you can check and decide what you need to do about it. When do we get the CPRs credited on the website for this session, for example? So Rishabh ji, generally we try and update within the period of 2 days, 2 to 3 days maximum. We update the attendance on the CP website. So whenever we update, you will immediately be able to see that the CPRs have been credited.
17th की मीटिंग का सीपी क्रेडिट का इंटीमेशन आज आ गई है.
So it is already there. So we try to do it in 2 to 3 days at the most. It is also a mandatory requirement from the institute side also. So we try and comply with that. Any other issues we have which we need to discuss, or I'll close the meeting for today. And you can rejoin tomorrow. We have another meeting tomorrow. And on 29th, we have already planned a meeting. And we are planning for a physical seminar also. The date is yet to be finalized, but we are awaiting some confirmation from the institute. So hopefully in the last week, we'll be also doing a physical seminar, and that will also inform you very soon. So 29th, we have a webinar on the essays, the standards on auditing. That is a webinar. Okay. So code of ethics, Sumit, we have already done today. And standards on auditing, we are doing on 29th. So both of the requirements would be taken care of. But of course, as I said, it is not only CPRs which is important. It is also that we keep on understanding, because a lot of changes are happening on a daily basis. Practically impossible for any of us to actually be aware of all the changes. So these professional interactions which we have actually helps us in understanding our requirements, especially when we are doing auditing, because we have to ensure compliance of all the laws. So it becomes important. Here, non-reflection on the website of CPRs can be terms and violations. I don't know how can you do some CP meeting and it is not getting reflected on the website, but they would definitely go as per their website only, unless until you are able to produce any evidence to the contrary. Is CPRs available for WIRC members for these sessions? Sir, I am not too sure, but because CP committee is one for the complete ICI, it is not divided into regions. So I do hope that you will be able to get CPRs. I generally also participate in the CP meetings as a speaker also, and I do travel to various zones, including WRC and EIRC and maybe SIRC also. So I do get CPRs as a speaker. I am not sure because I have not attended any program per se of different regions. But as a speaker, I do get CPRs credited for such sessions. So thank you so much, everybody. And you're most welcome to join tomorrow also for a very interactive session. Thank you so much, and have a good day.
हमारा कम्युनिकेशन